The 2016 presidential election was a historically pivotal moment in American politics. It was supposed to be a clash of political dynasties, the wife of a former president versus the brother of a former president, Hillary Clinton versus Jeb Bush. But against all odds, an outsider reshaped the race: Donald Trump. His unexpected victory in the Republican primaries didn't just end Jeb's campaign, it altered the course of history. America is antagonizing its allies while day by day the Constitution that once was held to the highest regard seems to matter less and less. That begs the question, what if Trump didn't beat Jeb Bush in the Republican primaries? Could Jeb have beaten Hillary, and more importantly, would he have been a decent president, saving the GOP from turning into a far-right populism machine? Jeb Bush is kind of a little meme in alternate history circles. Okay, not just a little one, he's a huge meme. But this video isn't meant to be a joke, at least not entirely, because to be fair, the concept of a Jeb Bush presidency is a joke in itself. Still, I actually want to explore what would have happened if Trump never beat him in the primaries and he went on to defeat Hillary Clinton. In this scenario, Jeb manages to defeat both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, becoming the 45th president of the United States. I don't just want to speculate about his presidency though, I want to examine how he could have won in the first place. Was this ever a real possibility, or was Jeb's campaign doomed from the start? Jeb entered the 2016 Republican primaries as an early frontrunner due to his family name, experience as Florida's governor, and massive financial backing. However, he never gained traction with voters, and Trump repeatedly humiliated him in the debates, branding him as low energy. He lost hard in the Iowa caucus, placing 6th overall. In the New Hampshire primary, he did a little better and reached 4th place with 11%. In the South Carolina primary, he again came 4th and dropped out of the race the same night. Trump, meanwhile, went on to beat Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. In short, Jeb never even had a chance. So what do we need to change for Jeb to actually have a chance? Honestly, a lot, since Jeb Bush was so incredibly uncharismatic. Actually, it's insane how Jeb managed to blow his early lead this hard. He had his brother's name, experience as the Florida governor, and massive financial backing. Still, he managed to uncharm his way out of a presidency. We need something to fix that. We need a high-energy Jeb, a Jeb that is confident and focused. And while we could just say that Jeb now magically has more energy, I think it's more fun to turn him into a functioning drug addict. And I have the perfect mix for him to be more effective in debates and public appearances. In this alternate timeline, Jeb Bush is a hardcore Adderall user, making him more focused and confident. Although at important debates and events, little Jeb also does a bit of skiing. He's riding the Miami Express. He's taking a stroll through the snowy hills. He's visiting the slopes before showtime. I think you get what I mean. Anyway, while making Jeb a drug addict sounds like cheap writing, I honestly see no other way. He had all the cards in his hands except for confidence and charisma. Something my little Adderall and nose candy can fix. Okay, I promise I won't mention the drugs anymore, and from now on this video will get more serious. We'll just assume that Jeb has charisma now. But how could he beat Trump in the primaries and later Hillary? We'll go over that briefly before we can actually look at his presidency, because how this 2016 race unfolds will have huge impacts on everything beyond. Jeb Bush was in our timeline and is in this timeline a mainstream conservative with establishment-friendly positions. Unfortunately for him, in 2016, the Republican base was in a populist, anti-establishment mood. And instead of at least trying to appear populist, Jeb played nice. Our high-energy Jeb is of course different and makes an effort to appeal to the populist voices. One major issue during the primaries was immigration. Jeb supported immigration reform, a pathway to citizenship, and he was fluent in Spanish. Trump obliterated him on this by running as the anti-immigration candidate. In this timeline, instead of being defensive, our high-energy Jeb goes on offense. He flips the script and calls Trump phony nationalist who outsources his products to China and Mexico. He slams Trump as all talk, no action on immigration, calling him a fake tough guy who hires undocumented workers at his hotels. You want a wall? I've governed a border state. You built a casino. Which one of us actually knows how to enforce immigration law? He asks Trump, who can't manage to clap back. Jeb just defeated Trump at his own game. He used his own weapons against him. Jeb also was a pro-business Republican who supported tax cuts and deregulation, but Trump positioned himself as the jobs candidate. Instead of playing nice, high-energy Jeb goes for the jugular. He humiliates Trump on his bankruptcies, Trump University and shady deals. He calls him a failed businessman who got rich off daddy's money. You bankrupted a casino. A casino. Do you know how dumb you have to be to lose money on blackjack? He even accuses Trump of being a closet Democrat because of his history of donating to Hillary Clinton. And with that, the primaries are sealed. In South Carolina, Jeb manages to take the lead with 30%, Trump coming only 4th with a little over 10%. And just like Jeb did in our timeline, Trump drops out the same night. And Jeb Bush, with his newly found confidence, has no difficulties to beat the other GOP candidates. His fiercest competitor there was Ted Cruz, who managed to gain popularity in a similar way Trump did in our time, by riding the populist train at full speed. But unlike Trump, Ted Cruz is unlikable even for hardcore hillbillies. So Jeb still beats him easily. Now, the real battle begins. Jeb Bush versus Hillary Clinton. The simple thought of that race should make anyone who is remotely anti-establishment puke. The brother of George Bush versus the wife of Bill Clinton. Could you imagine a less exciting race? I honestly can't. At least in this timeline, Jeb has a lot of energy. With the help of Adderall and a little extra snowy motivation, Jeb can sharpen his attacks, outwit Hillary on the debate stage, and paint her as part of the out-of-touch establishment, while he presents himself as the refined but aggressive alternative. He constantly reminds voters that she's been around for decades and represents the status quo, which is exactly what voters were rebelling against in 2016. During the first debate, he attacks her like this: Hillary, how can the American people trust you to run this country when you can't even manage your emails? Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2016 was already weak, especially the emails, and the fact that Bernie Sanders was more popular than her could really help him win. Jeb tries his best to establish himself as a less establishment candidate than Hillary, though he can't hide the fact that he is still a deep part of the establishment. Anti-establishment voters either don't vote altogether or go for Jeb, the lesser of two evils in their eyes. Another advantage he has over Hillary might actually be his charisma. Jeb Bush, during the 2016 primaries, kinda came off like a dog. If he had higher energy but kept that little unseriousness surrounding him, he could actually feel very relatable, especially to many younger voters, which is something Hillary Clinton, no matter how hard she tried, simply couldn't do. Think about her policies what you will, but that woman was not likable, especially if you're young. Oh, and of course, we can't forget who Jeb Bush would pick as his VP. I think the only two good choices would have been Marco Rubio and Nikki Haley. Marco Rubio came third in the Republican primaries and aligns well with Jeb's traditional conservative policies. However, I think Jeb would go for Nikki Haley. For one, that would take away some enthusiasm about Hillary Clinton being the female candidate, since if she loses, a woman would still become VP. So this whole talk about the first female president is just less effective. Also, I think Haley would complement Jeb Bush's traditional conservatism well with her neo-conservative approach, which could appeal well to younger voters. With these changes, Jeb has really decent chances of winning against Hillary. With his sharp attacks, policy depth and aggressive nature, he can win debates, sway undecided voters and ultimately edge Hillary out in key battleground states. And so, on November 5, 2016, Jeb Bush beats Hillary Clinton. While he lost the popular vote, it was decently close, with Jeb being only 200,000 votes behind. However, another population-related thing about this election stands out. The turnout is the worst in recent history, with only 47.6% of the population voting. While Jeb beat Hillary, overall enthusiasm about the election was extremely low. Many Americans feel very disillusioned, not only with Jeb and Hillary, but with the establishment as a whole. Jeb Bush needs to be a very effective president now to ensure that this unenthusiasm won't cripple America and further strengthen populist factions. But can he do that? Jeb Bush now sits in the office his brother left 8 years ago. Finally, he has fulfilled his destiny. His family's legacy feels complete now. The GOP breathes a sigh of relief as they have avoided the populist chaos started by Trump. However, Jeb himself can't breathe a sigh of relief, quite the opposite. Media all around the country quickly pick up about the historic low turnout, despite the race being close. That hasn't happened for a very long time. The media, both on the left and right, quickly blame the political establishment for the turnout numbers. They point out that in both parties, anti-establishment candidates gained significant traction: Bernie Sanders and Ted Cruz. Both of them are now looking to take advantage of the anti-establishment vibe. Jeb Bush needs to regain trust from Americans fast if he wants to stay in the Oval Office for more than 4 years. However, while our Jeb Bush is more energetic and thus more likable, he is still Jeb Bush. And at his core, Jeb Bush is a traditional conservative. So Jeb Bush governs like a traditional conservative. And even before he got into the office, he already managed to enrage the populist GOP faction. He picked safe, establishment-heavy cabinet members like Mitt Romney as chief of staff. Ted Cruz views this as a betrayal, and Fox News, whose viewer base is increasingly populist, jumps on this train. Tucker Carlson slams Jeb hard each time another establishment cabinet pick is announced. During the first year of his presidency, Jeb simply ignores this backlash, viewing it as nothing more than some small dogs who bark the loudest. In 2017, he passes several laws that don't really help him in gaining popularity. For one, since he's a corporate sellout, he of course passes corporate tax cuts. Most people don't really care too much about them, but it does ignite the populist left a little bit. Two other policies he passes hurt him far more. 1. His mid-2017 immigration reform. He pushes for a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson attack him viciously for this, calling it amnesty. By that point, Ted Cruz appears on Fox News regularly, slamming Jeb hard. Carlson and Cruz escalate their disapproval of Jeb further, and by June of 2017, the GOP is infighting hard, and instead of trying to build bridges and appease the far right, Jeb instead passes another very controversial policy. He revives the Trans-Pacific Partnership in early 2018. Factory workers and blue-collar conservatives feel betrayed, seeing it as a job-killing deal. Many of them now jump on the Jeb hate bandwagon, started by Cruz and Carlson. Bernie Sanders also attacks Jeb from the left, calling TPP corporate greed in action. As a result, Jeb loses the Rust Belt entirely. States like Michigan, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania despise him. The only thing where Jeb performs decently is foreign policy. In that regard, he is very similar to his brother, hawkish. He maintains strong NATO ties, unlike Trump, keeping the alliance and thus the West strong. He increases troop presence in the Middle East to combat ISIS, but doesn't start any new wars. This is all standard neoconservative stuff, but no one cares. Unfortunately for Jeb, the one thing where he's actually doing good doesn't help him at all. Conservative voters are already furious at Jeb, but by the middle of 2018, things get way worse for him. The southern border crisis worsens significantly. Tucker Carlson slams Jeb Bush for not fighting the culture war, saying that Jeb would rather talk about tax policy than defend America. Ted Cruz, in turn, gains significant support within the GOP and criticizes Jeb at every opportunity he gets. At this point, the GOP is basically in a state of civil war. As the midterms are approaching, the GOP establishment commits another blunder. Instead of finally acknowledging the far-right populist wave, they back establishment candidates during the 2018 midterms, and of course, that bites them back. Thanks to unpopular Jeb and the angry GOP crowd, the Democrats sweep the midterms and now control the House and Senate with a decent margin. The 2018 midterms turned out to be a bloodbath for the GOP. Still, Jeb and the GOP establishment, led by Mitch McConnell, keep their heads in the sand. They believe they can get out of this mess the old-school conservative way. And to be fair, Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz still don't nearly have the same populist appeal Trump had in our timeline. By late 2018, Jeb's approval rating amongst Republicans drops below 50%. And while that is a big issue, there's not anyone that's more popular. Ted Cruz is a major challenger, yes, but he is no Trump. Still, he positions himself for a 2020 primary challenge, and in January 2019, Ted Cruz officially announces that he will run to challenge Jeb in 2020. Reactions are mixed. The GOP dismisses him and sponsors avoid him, but many blue-collar Republicans feel hurt and thus voice their support. Imagine a smaller, less enthusiastic MAGA crowd putting Ted Cruz flags on their lawn. Okay, yeah, maybe that's an over-exaggeration. I don't think Cruz would get idolized even remotely close to the same level Trump did. What the far-right populist crowd needs is a strong leading figure, but all they get is Ted Cruz. And in this timeline, they don't even know how close they came to truly finding their god. Anyway, while Ted Cruz is trying his best to leverage the situation, there's another politician riding the Jeb hate bandwagon, yielding far better results: Bernie Sanders. Similarly to Ted Cruz, he is appealing to the disillusioned voters who hate the establishment now more than ever. But unlike Ted Cruz, Bernie Sanders is actually charismatic and can articulate himself well. His anti-establishment stance also feels a little more authentic than Cruz's. The Democrats, similarly to the Republicans, split between establishment figures and the new populist wave. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer expectedly placed their money behind another candidate that is positioning himself to run in 2020. Someone we're all too familiar with: Joe, the throat goat Biden. Okay, I don't know why I called him that. Anyway, Bernie Sanders still is far more popular than Biden, and at least some notable Democrats noticed that. Mainly Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg. They're both trying to establish themselves as 2020 candidates, but compared to our timeline, they shift noticeably to the left, dragging donors and supporters with them. Anyway, before we move on to the 2020 election, there's one more potential candidate we need to talk about: the man of the hour himself, Jeb Bush. With his popularity being at an all-time low, would he even try to run again? Yes he would. Because Jeb is a Bush, and you know what Bushes are? Power hungry. Also, they're rich and have lots of donors and establishment support, so yeah, Jeb is convinced he'll get the nomination. But will he though? The 2020 primaries in some ways mirror each other. Both the Republicans and Democrats are in a state of infighting. Populism versus the establishment. Although the Republican infighting is far more severe and in the spotlight, the Democrats are keeping their troubles mostly hidden from the public, appearing very stable compared to the Republicans, who by the beginning of 2020 still are in a state of civil war. Actually, that civil war has completely escalated by now. Fox News is fully under the control of the Carlson faction and is openly and aggressively against the president. They've thrown their full support behind Ted Cruz. And of course, this was all Tucker Carlson's doing. Behind the scenes, he negotiated heavily with Cruz and they struck a deal. If Cruz wins the Republican nomination, he'll pick Carlson as his running mate. Tucker Carlson as vice president. Sounds insane, right? But think about who the current president of the United States is. When everything is crazy, nothing is. And when it comes to sheer popularity, popularity, Cruz actually beats Jeb. His supporters have some things Jeb's supporters don't have. Anger. A lot of anger. And populism is fueled by anger. Unfortunately for Cruz, his engine isn't exactly top tier. No amount of fuel is going to turn him into a race car. He's more like a Toyota Prius that tries to be a Lamborghini. What I'm trying to say is, Ted Cruz is unlikable, and running a campaign on populism while being unlikable simply isn't a great strategy. Still, it could have worked if it weren't for one simple factor. Similarly to what the Democratic Convention did in 2016 to Bernie Sanders, the Republican Convention in 2020 tries very hard to sabotage Ted Cruz. But with the help of Tucker Carlson and Fox News, Cruz puts up a big fight. And while Jeb is occupied with White House stuff, Ted goes on a spree around the country, trying to win as many delegates as possible. Still, just like Bernie in 2016, he can't beat the establishment within his own party. And on May 17, 2020, Ted Cruz officially drops out of the race, as he has no path to victory left. Tucker Carlson goes live in a fury of rage, spouting wild insults at the Republican Party and calls for all actual Republicans to boycott Jeb Bush in the election. He even calls Jeb Bush a traitor and claims he should be impeached for sabotaging Cruz's campaign. Anyway, let's turn time back a little to the beginning of 2020 and see how the Democratic primaries are unfolding. The main battle is obvious: liberal establishment versus the leftist populist flank, Joe Biden versus Bernie Sanders. However, this race is noticeably more civilized than the Republican one, with both candidates holding rallies in an attempt to win delegates. Bernie Sanders draws in far bigger crowds, but just like 4 years ago, the Democratic establishment seems to be against him. However, this time Bernie has learned and also holds far more cards, since he simply is far more popular. This timeline's America is strongly gripped by a hatred towards the establishment, and many, even within the Democratic Party, know that picking an anti-establishment candidate means almost certain victory. And so, the other noteworthy 2020 primary candidates, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, and Kamala Harris, all meet with Bernie Sanders behind closed doors to discuss strategy. They all want the same thing: a part in his administration in exchange for dropping out of the race and endorsing him. And Sanders, being the ever-pragmatic man, manages to make all three happy, and one by one, they all drop out before April of 2020, strongly voicing support for Sanders. Sanders now is the far more popular candidate and has the endorsement of all other noteworthy Democratic candidates, besides Joe Biden, of course. Still, the Democratic establishment does not want Bernie to win, and they now make their sabotage attempts even more blatantly obvious. CNN turns staunchly anti-Bernie and voices strong endorsements of Biden. This move has the potential to seriously harm Bernie's chances. However, they haven't accounted for the man they're putting their trust behind. Joe Biden in our timeline has proven that he can put country above career if it seems necessary. He knows that the Democrats need to appear strong and united right now to leverage the advantage they have. Infighting this hard right now could put them in the same spot the Republicans are in, and Joe Biden does not want to end up like a liberal version of Jeb Bush. So, on July 21, 2020, just as the primaries began getting truly heated, Joe Biden makes a historic move. In a public letter, he acknowledges that he is not what the American people need right now. They need someone who they can relate to, someone who they feel can help turn the country away from the corrupt establishment and truly reignite the American dream. In the final line of his letter, Joe Biden writes, "And while it has been my intention to seek election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as a politician." This selfless act earns Biden respect across the aisle. Now Bernie Sanders can truly shine. It's time for both Jeb Bush and Bernie Sanders to pick their VP nominations before the final showdown can go down. Okay, yeah, Jeb just keeps Nikki Haley, but who does Bernie pick? I think the choice here is quite obvious. Remember when the three Democratic candidates dropped out to endorse Bernie? All of them made deals with him to gain some power in his administration. And one of the deals would have been for the vice presidency. And the person who made that deal with Bernie is of course Elizabeth Warren. She aligns with his progressive agenda, but is also more acceptable to party elites than a far-left choice like AOC. Now the true battle can begin, the presidential election of 2020. A race between two vastly different behemoths, the far less populist king Bernie Sanders against the established neoconservative Jeb Bush. A battle for the ages. Okay, yeah, it wouldn't be a battle for the ages. This is like David versus Goliath, but David forgot his slingshot. Bernie enters the race with a mostly united party behind his back and very strong support from the public. His base is very enthusiastic. Jeb, on the other hand, is a historically unpopular candidate with a fractured GOP and harsh criticism coming from all sides. No matter how well he campaigns now, he has already failed as a president. Bernie hasn't. And to be frank, there is no way, even with all the Adderall and Christmas powder in the world, that Jeb could win a debate against Bernie in this scenario. He might make some populists happy by calling Bernie a communist, but there are simply way too many angles Bernie could attack him from. During the first debate in late July, Bernie completely wipes the floor with him. He criticizes his anti-worker policies like the TPP, his failure to calm the border crisis, his strong establishment ties, his failure to unite the party, his failure to rule America, and most gut-wrenchingly, the failure to step up to his family's name. Jeb refuses to go on another debate. And of course, there's one more thing Jeb can be attacked with. Without it, it would have been hard for him to win, but this makes it outright impossible for him to be re-elected. COVID-19. During the last year of his presidency, and right as the election campaigns are starting to gain traction, the pandemic hits. I think Jeb would have done a better job at handling it than Trump, which to be fair is not a hard task. Still, a mask mandate and lockdown would have made him unpopular, especially on the far right. So straight up, a large number of the Republican base refuses to vote in the 2020 election, instead fully going down the conspiracy path. Thanks to Jeb and COVID-19, trust in the American government is at an all-time low. And so, on November 5th, Bernie Sanders wins the election in a landslide. The Democrats now control the Senate, House and Oval Office. That would make for an interesting scenario itself, I think. If you want a video about the 2016 Bernie victory, let me know in the comments. Anyway, even if Jeb Bush miraculously managed to win the 2016 race by a miracle or with the power of early Christmas, there's no way on earth he could have been an effective president. America at the time really did not want to have another establishment-friendly, big name in politics kinda guy in the Oval Office. On top, new conservative policies just weren't popular at the time. Donald Trump won in our timeline for a reason, and that reason is also the reason why Jeb Bush would have been incredibly unpopular. He simply was the wrong guy at the wrong time. Even as president, Jeb Bush would be remembered as nothing more than the guy who made Bernie Sanders inevitable. I know this video was not as serious as some of my other ones. I'm still in the process of finding my style, so I'm just trying out different things to see what works and what is fun to make. Let me know in the comments if you enjoy this type of content or you prefer more serious analytical videos like my last one. So if you want to watch a more serious video of mine, check out if the US will have a civil war before 2030. If you want another less serious concept, check out this video about Dick Cheney's daughter being straight, which completely changes American foreign policy, especially in the Middle East.